This is Greg Troutwine with Maritime Reporter TV, and we're here today with Alan Leet, the CEO, and Nadine Robinson, the Technical Advisor, Environmental Sustainability of IMCA, to discuss IMCA's new recommended code of practice on environmental sustainability. To start us off, can you please give us a by the numbers look at IMCA today using the metrics of your choice?
Well, thank you for inviting me, Greg. You'll know that in any trade association, the key metrics are in fact membership and financial strength. And without members, you lose relevance, and without the balance sheet, you fade away. So I'm pleased to say that IMCA scores highly on both of these measures. And we have plenty of business KPIs, of course, but these are the critical ones. And of course, this has been achieved at a time when our industry has undergone significant disruption, financial stress, the whole lot. Certainly the worst economic environment in offshore oil and gas in recent history, and even more so than in 1986, in my opinion. Gives that some perspective. According to some market analysts, investment in the E&P market has roughly halved from around $300 billion in 2013, 2014 to around $150 billion in 2020. And the value destruction in terms of stock prices, profitability, asset impairments, careers, etc. Well, you know the story as well as I do. They've been extremely significant and well publicized. No one is immune, of course, to these forces, but our membership level has remained extremely robust. We have over 700 member companies today in 60 countries. We don't have individuals as members. There have to be companies active in the industry. And our finances are likewise in good shape. We're actually recruiting in technical areas, in the wind energy market, and in marketing. So we feel we've been very resilient because we have a highly relevant purpose of being here in the first place, and a powerful value proposition for our members. Couple that with some signs of recovery in oil and gas and continued growth in wind, and things start to look a little better for our industry.
I know that the process to deliver IMCA's recommended code of practice on environmental sustainability has been several years in the making, but can you give us some insight on why this document? Why now?
Yeah, it's a good question, Greg, because historically, our industry has tended to wrap the environmental risks of damage, environmental damage, into health and safety and quality functions. And for good reasons, in that we're working offshore in close proximity to live wells, live pipelines, production facilities, and the like. So when accidents or damage occur, they can have profound implications. So the industry has taken enormous attention and respect to managing these risks. Now, in 2017, our strategic review at the time identified environmental sustainability and the energy transition as strategic themes for us to develop for the long term, not the short-term measures, but the long term. And we recognized that we needed a step change and a move beyond the traditional risk management approach and the traditional corporate social responsibility approach. Of course, they need to continue, but we felt we needed to add a new strategic approach to this question. So in 2018, we started a pilot committee. 2018 is coincidentally the same year that the UN published its special report on climate change. And we started off quite modestly. We targeted some specific small steps to increase awareness in our membership through meetings and seminars, for example, by focusing on practical ways to reduce emissions through better journey planning, through to the benefits of using hybrid power systems on DP ships, to considering different fuels. We also looked at life below the water and ran an awareness campaign for eliminating single-use plastics offshore. This was led by one of our board member companies. Very good effect, and provoked ideas and competition, in fact, in the management of consumables and their waste. We also published various bulletins on environmental sustainability to share best practice. Since then, of course, Nadine has joined us to bring the detailed environmental and climate change expertise and help us take bigger steps on this journey. And you know, Greg, IMCA is no stranger to the energy transition. Our Renewable Energy Committee celebrates its 10th year in operation today. principally in wind, where we have been quietly working away, developing specific best practice for the wind sector where needed. And of course, our main library of guidance documents are equally applicable in oil and gas and wind markets. I mean, our members design, construct all forms of offshore production facilities. And technically, of course, a wind farm uses largely the same assets, not identical in every way, but largely the same assets, certainly the same engineering, project management skills in building an oil field. So these markets are very closely aligned, and we have every intention of having real relevance to that sector. So the time for our code is now, because it's needed now. This is a first for our sector, and I think we've got the timing about right. At least that's what our contractor members and oil company members are saying.
I know in this short time that we can't cover the entirety of the publication, but please, can you share some of the key takeaways as a company serving these markets? What sorts of actionable intelligence will I walk away with?
So I think there's quite a few things that companies can take away from, in the maritime industry, can take away from our new recommended code of practice. I think the first thing is that there's really two facets to environmental sustainability. There's the piece related to natural capital and including biodiversity, and there's also the crucial decarbonization piece, which is central to the energy transition. So the most important takeaway is that this is no longer a nice to have, but this is something that is actually fundamental to our industry's value creation and that of our member companies and other companies across the industry in the long term, and also our member companies' clients. The other thing I would say is that different companies are at different stages of their environmental journey. So obviously the takeaways are going to be a little bit different. We've considered, by developing the code by our members, for our members, we've considered a number of key issues which can be considered material across the industry. So we have covered everything ranging from emissions reduction to energy efficiency and management, to waste and resources management and end-of-life assets. We've also addressed engagement with the supply chain. We've considered digitalization and automation, and we've touched on competence and training. And finally, we've also covered reporting. And I think that sort of speaks to another key takeaway is that there's no single approach to environmental sustainability. That this is a multifaceted and complex area and requires a multifaceted and multifaceted approach to advancing environmental sustainability, both within individual member companies and also across the industry as a whole. But I think that's something that the code has demonstrated we can work together to do, and in sharing our experiences and exchanging best practices, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, so the industry can collectively work together to learn. In the code, we also produced a second document, which is called At a Glance. And that's sort of specifically gained to get an overview of what are those key takeaways. And in the At a Glance publication, we identify 7 practical steps that companies can take. So, and I encourage all companies in the maritime market to read our At a Glance publication. So there's sort of 7, if I could spend a moment just to take you through those 7 key areas. So the first one is to develop emissions reductions objectives and targets consistent with the 2018 IMO greenhouse gas initial strategy and also aligned to the Paris Agreement. The second thing that needs to be done is to commit to and prioritize efficient operations. The third area is really related to the 14th UN Sustainable Development Goal, that is to protect and conserve life below water. In this respect, we have a responsibility for managing the process of life below water. The fourth key area relates, as I mentioned before, we have the topics of natural resources management, of waste management, and also of end of life. And so we're encouraging companies to apply the circular economy concept to these key areas, and we give some practical steps for how they can do that in the code. Then the next area, as I've alluded to before, is that we can't do this alone. So we need to ensure that we develop environmental objectives and that we engage with the supply chain and we cascade these objectives to the supply chain as well. And we want to advance the competence of everyone within our industry in terms of managing environmental issues. And finally, we want to measure and disclose progress. And I think that's kind of a key one to end on, because there's the basic premise: if you don't measure it, how on earth can we actually manage it successfully? So for each of the core areas that I've mentioned in some of those practical steps, we not only offer some guidance on what could be done and has been done by many of our member companies, but we also provide a link to some key resources to signpost to help others who are at various stages in their environmental sustainable journey.
Excellent overview, Nadine. I truly appreciate it. I'm going to kind of pick up on that last thread, because as this is a voluntary code, does IMCA have a strategy to monitor, assess, and report on the progress the companies are taking and making?
So thank you, Greg. In fact, it is a voluntary code, and the reason for that, a lot of it stems from the diversity of experiences in the different stages of our members in their environmental journey. We consider it what we call recommended practice. So obviously we highly encourage all of our members to read it and to consider its applicability in the context of their own business strategy and operations. So we're conscious one size does not fit all, but we do recognize the differences within across the membership, and we do have set some expectations and a level of ambition for the industry. So no sooner did we approve the draft and endorse it by our Environmental Sustainability Committee, they were on to that next question you had immediately. So they wanted to consider, well, what can we do to assess our progress and impact? And in fact, in the development of the code, many of our members have told us that it's actually helped them to frame their internal thinking on a number of different topics and themes, and that they're identifying areas that maybe they haven't thought of it in comparison to their peers so much, and that they would wish to consider and delve into further. So I think that's a really positive development. Now, on the back of it, what we've done is we've taken all of the various suggestions, recommendations, and good practices in the code, and we've translated them into a series of statements. And the idea is that these are going to form the skeleton for the self-assessment tool. So members can reflect and assess how they're doing against the contents of the code. And this is not an approach unique to IMCA. In fact, we've modeled it off of a similar approach from the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They have what's called a responsible business conduct compass, and they use a similar tool for the companies to reflect on how they're meeting their guidelines. So that's sort of where we're starting. So we will start with this pilot of the self-assessment, and we're just going to be discussing this with members in the next 2 weeks at the next Environmental Sustainability Committee meeting. And if we start with this straightforward self-assessment tool, then they can get a sense of where they are. It's really sort of the litmus test for our code. How are we doing? And so you could imagine that they could almost traffic light it, sort of a red, amber, or green. We also hope that this won't just be a useful tool for the members themselves, but that they will share their self-assessments with IMCA in confidence. And then we can do some analysis to get a sense of collectively how the industry is doing, and also where some of the gaps are needed, so we can then tailor our guidance going forward to fill those critical gaps. So we'll hope that we can get a sense of not a formal benchmarking, but at least a general idea of where each respondent fits within the wider membership base. So I kind of see the recommended code is kind of like the overarching high-level document, or if you imagine it's like a tree, it's that solid, robust trunk, and then we're going to be developing various branches of guidance off the back of it. So I would also say that we're probably not yet at the stage of having a league table for environmental sustainability or a formal benchmarking. This is really going to take a little bit of time to develop our core set of indicators and refine them to make sure they're meaningful for our industry. And we want to do that strategically, and we want to sort of build on our progress over time.
As I had even said before, having covered this market for 30 years, previously I would contend that claims of being green were more marketing fodder than real practice. Can you put in perspective the importance of environmental sustainability as a business imperative today?
Well, thank you, Greg. I understand the contention, but we feel this is for real. And it's quickly becoming established as a business imperative for a variety of practical business reasons. I mean, just look at the stakeholders, the clients, investors, workforce, and of course, the wider public. You know, I think oil companies have been very successful in raising the bar in offshore safety as a business driver. And they understandably use safety as a proxy for business efficiency, and they want to do business with contractors who are safe and efficient. And you can't do one without the other. The same cycle happened with quality. And today, environment is the new business driver. And members are telling us that their clients, i.e. the oil companies and energy companies, are increasingly using environmental performance measures in their evaluation of supply chain at bidding stage. So at the bidding stage. So this is highly relevant to business today. And of course, there are the investors and the stockholders and larger companies. They have a major voice in the strategic direction of energy companies more than ever today. And the environmental agenda is now a key component of that voice. The European super majors were perhaps the first to address this, but the same is now the case with the US super majors. Just look at the multiples, the valuation multiples of ESG focused companies, and you can see where the new money is going into offshore wind, for instance. So environmental sustainability has practical implications here. It impacts the cost of capital and the whole non-financial reporting requirements taken seriously by big business is where the data speaks for itself rather than the sort of marketing fodder that you referred to. So clearly investor expectations can't be ignored and therefore this is for real. Our workforce today has a much stronger voice on these matters, and given a choice, where do you think the young talent of the future will be attracted to in the energy industry? It'll be to companies that have a strong environmental agenda and are respected for having it central to their business strategy. And of course, finally, there's the social contract, the license to operate by the court of public opinion, which politicians and business leaders, they just can't ignore. So, last year there were opinions that the impact of COVID, the lockdowns, would likely stall or delay the public's view on environment and the energy transition generally. From my perspective, that doesn't seem to be the case. It may well have accelerated visibility and the urgency of public's concern here. So I understand the greenwashing argument you refer to, but I think it's now very influential in business on a broad scale and to our members' industrial strategy, and will only increase in importance going forward. So